So Andy, we know that trust operates a bit differently in B2B than it does in other types of marketing, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our research has found that trust is decisive through the B2B buying process. It impacts your ability to get invited for more tenders and more bids. It helps you close those deals. It helps you cross and upsell your services, and it helps you, get repeat business and charge a premium for your for what you offer. And I suppose if you think about it, it's very logical. In B2B, you're often talking about multi-million pound, multi-year contracts. You're talking about a high degree of personal accountability for the individuals that are making those decisions. But what you often find is that a lot of B2B marketing becomes quite short-term and quite transactional. So there is a natural pressure on how we're going to hit our quarterly target, on more immediate campaigns that are more product focused. There tends to be an emphasis on efficiency over effectiveness, and there's less time for thinking creatively or thinking about how do you really build trust or deepen the relationships with customers.
Yeah, it's easy to use that big picture perspective in the course of chasing your quarterly or annual growth cycle, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, our feeling is that, it is the creativity, the storytelling that has suffered. And, when you're talking about sales cycles that can last for, 2 to 5 years, depending on the sector, actually it's really important that you can have an ongoing conversation with your customers and prospects, that you can nurture that conversation, that you are bringing fresh value, new perspectives to that, and you're thinking about that, as a sustained activity that's, really trying to build trust in the long term.
Such a great point. And as you say, the buying cycles for B2B are very long, but also the stakes are really high for these buyers. They've got a massive professional kind of commitment that they're placing on the line over this course of what can be a very long cycle. Now, I know that the Trust Index has come up with a series of kind of almost attributes or lenses that we think about for what are the factors that drive trust. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what those are and also how they might dial up or down at different points in the selling cycle?
Yeah, so I think if you speak to probably any salesperson, anybody that's worked in business for a period of time, they'll emphasize the importance of trust and relationships. But one of the challenges is, how do you actually quantify that? And so one of the things that Edelman has looked at is what are the different components that go into it. And so we would break those down into 5 things. There is ability, which is the reputation of the company, the confidence that the people will do what they say they do. Dependability, the quality of the products that they offer, their ability to keep the promises. Integrity, the company, is going to be honest, transparent, adding value to kind of business and society. Sense of self, which is around, sharing.
Is it good for me?
And sharing the positive values with the company. And vision, which is around, having a perspective, a view on, how the industry is going to evolve, and that you can be a partner for the long term with your clients. And I think what's interesting about those factors is, we're able to score and quantify those. You can compare those for your own company, for your competitors. You can look at that for the industry as a whole, and it provides quite a useful lens for then thinking about what is it we need to do to drive more impact. Because, for example, your customers may feel that you're rating very highly on your ability and dependability, but actually perhaps what they're wanting to see is a longer term vision, a deeper perspective, and that can help you shape, your content, your activity, and how you plan and evaluate your programs.
So what are some of the things then that I as a marketer might do if I'm trying to, let's say I've got a company where people think our ability is good, we're good at what we do, we've got kind of a long reputation for dependability, etc. But maybe I've had some issues, or there's been a crisis recently that's made them slightly doubt our integrity, or whether we have a vision for the future. How would you start to work with a client that we were trying to help evolve along that pathway?
So I think if you've quantified where you're at today, I think you can then start thinking, well, look, what is both the topics but also the content that's going to help us with that. So, in that instance, perhaps, there is more work that the company needs to do that is talking about, how the industry is going to evolve, looking further ahead at, bigger trends in the industry and how that's going to be impacted. Perhaps they need to try to tie that to some of the, broader societal impact that they're driving as an organisation. And then that might lead you towards different types of activity because, for example, maybe that means you need, more content with third parties talking about the future, talking about
So independent validation.
Exactly, or perhaps that means that you need to zero in on more case studies, more examples of how you're working constructively with your partners in the communities that you serve. So it's helpful for thinking probably about not only the content but also the tactics and the tools that you use to bring that to life.
Well, let's talk about some of those tactics and tools, because I know that there are a couple of things that businesses often default to in terms of what are good methodologies, if you will, for building that long-standing, durable trust. One of which is the thing that's often called thought leadership, which could mean almost anything you want it to be. But I think here at Edelman, we mean kind of driving real change-led, action-oriented thinking that brings something new into the discourse, positions you into leadership. So for you, what is your definition of thought leadership, if you will, and kind of how would you think about using it to reposition the way a company is perceived from a trust point of view?
Yeah, so I think thought leadership is probably one of the most widely used and misunderstood phrases.
Or not understood.
Or not understood at all. It often ends up encompassing thinly veiled product marketing, the blog that the CEO desperately wanted to write about something that happened to him at the weekend. Those things, are, I wouldn't necessarily classify those as thought leadership.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about here is bringing together, people to talk about, topics that they genuinely know about, where they're bringing a fresh perspective, where they're bringing new ideas, where they are convening discussions in their industry, when they're thinking about, how can they bring a different view to, some of the challenges that are shaping their segment. I think one of the interesting things about thought leadership is, whilst it is often perceived of as being a little more abstract and as something that's a bit more top of funnel in terms of being about awareness. Actually, we do a study with LinkedIn each year with 3,500 business decision makers and around thought leadership impact. And what that study shows is that it can actually drive a tangible impact right through the decision making process, from whether that's through helping introduce new propositions, new offers, whether that's helping you cross or upsell your services, whether that's enabling you to generate repeat business. Around 61% of the respondents also say they'd be more willing to pay a premium to companies that can demonstrate the quality of their thinking. So actually you can see there that if you think about it in the round, if you think about how that activity can be activated through your marketing, your sales, your business development, it actually can have a really meaningful and powerful impact for marketeers.
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be a really fantastic way of kind of changing the conversation, putting yourself at the heart of the conversation. But I think one of the things that's often very challenging is, of course, you're not the only ones doing it. Everybody is trying to get into that landscape and sort of change the conversation. So maybe this is where that transparency and authenticity comes through. Maybe, I'd be curious your take, but is this one of those areas where it really is about kind of going deep into understanding what the contribution that you're making is to the ecosystem and what you uniquely as a brand or as a leader are able to speak about? Or what are some of the other things that you've seen that kind of really help things stand out and kind of like break through the morass of lots and lots of people who are trying to lead when there can only be, by definition, one leader?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we've developed is we call it the thought leadership flywheel, and it has 6 different kind of attributes of the most successful thought leadership. And when you are able to combine all of those attributes, that should be a virtuous circle, and that should really be helping drive value for your business. The starting point for that is around finding the white space. So you know, what is it that you uniquely can bring as a company? What is the unexpected angle? One of the challenges with a lot of marketing content is it can often be seen to just, you know, aggregate a lot of the things that are already out there. But, you know, when you've got something there that you can really bring your own unique perspective to, that really stands out. So an example of that is some of the work that Edelman's been involved with for Microsoft around its Work Trends Index. With that, Microsoft's used trillions of data points from its own productivity suite to examine the way the world of work is changing, the way it's impacted by AI, by flexible working, and it's something that's, you know, unique because it's based on their data, but it's formed a long-term platform that they can really use to talk about a multitude of different topics. Some of the other factors within that flywheel, you know, there is a piece around relevance, but within that there is, you know, trying to avoid the everything to everyone trap. There is there is a tendency to try to develop campaigns that cover multiple sectors, multiple markets, you know, satisfy everyone.
The classic, the audience is everyone.
Exactly.
And that's not an audience.
No, you know, actually, you know, being more specific, you know, really thinking about primary research, thinking about, you know, fresh insight from customers and you know, from your teams that are on the ground, really helps with that piece. Some of the other factors are around trust. Obviously, being Edelman, we always like to include trust in everything, but I think in that, when you're thinking about thought leadership, it's around who are the different voices you can bring into this? How can you bring diverse perspectives? Do you want to bring in scientists? Do you want to bring in researchers? Are there third parties that you can include that add a different angle to your story? There was a campaign that we did for another of our clients where we were looking at topics around transformation of businesses and kind of the impact of the pandemic. And we ended up bringing in the Taiwanese digital minister to talk about some of the radical changes that, you know, they brought in when the pandemic landed, and totally different perspective, unexpected, very different to some of the other views that were brought in on that subject, but actually, you know, it kind of provokes a different angle for the audience.
A real fresh take.